we're gonna get started. I just want to remind people of this UAB leadership and lecture series in academic medicine is one where we've invited speakers from across the country, both to learn from them and for them to get a chance to see UAB and visit Birmingham. And we've had two other speakers, Daryl Kirsch, Peter Slavin from the MGH, Daryl, the president of the AAMC, and today we have Paul Rothman. Will and Jim and I have looked forward to these leaders coming in, both to share the complexities and changes that are going on in academic medicine, but also hear how their programs are dealing with it and also expose them to the things that we're doing at UAB and that we're proud of. So today we're excited to have Paul Rothman, and I shared with some of the chairs, Paul has been a good friend and certainly in some ways a counselor and mentor as I started this job. Paul is a graduate of MIT and subsequently went to Columbia for medical school, where he graduated AOA and stayed there for his residency. And he really grew his academic career as a intensive research immunologist focusing on cytokines, head of the rheumatology group, and eventually vice chair of medicine. He was recruited to Iowa to be the chair of medicine, and in short order, really helped transform their Department of Medicine and was recognized as a more than capable leader and was asked to be dean at Iowa, and did a great job in that role of really reestablishing both an active practice plan committed to the academics, building a really premier state school to encompass care around the state of Iowa, as well as to grow the research program there. Soon after that period where he led Iowa, Ed Miller stepped down after 16 years as being the first CEO of Johns Hopkins Medicine and dean of the medical faculty. And as a brief period of time that I served on the Hopkins board, there were concerns about being able to replace an icon like Ed at Hopkins, but they were very successful in recruiting Paul from the Midwest back to the East Coast at Johns Hopkins. Paul's the 14th dean, but the second CEO of Johns Hopkins Medicine, and really has done a remarkable job in galvanizing a new strategic plan, in building a focus on growing and now operationalizing their new large, over $8 billion clinical enterprise, integrating new hospitals in the DC area, as well as in Florida. Paul's a thoughtful visionary about where healthcare is going, about academics, where science needs to be going, and investment in science, but also the nuances and complex changes that are going on in healthcare. Maryland is a complex state and often in some ways ahead of the curve, and they're navigating those landscapes of healthcare changes with a system that not too dissimilar from ours. They have their own health insurance plan. They serve an urban area that's diverse. They have an integrated really faculty plan that's engaged primarily at the Hopkins hospitals, and they have a chance to really be an influencer not only in Maryland but across the country, which we'd like to do as well. So Paul, we're glad you've made the trip to Birmingham. We're excited to hear your talk, and we look forward to a continued relationship.
Oh, and that was over the top. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I have not been to Birmingham before, so it's been a lovely visit. And I really like the idea that you and Will and Jim had about having academic health centers share best practices and learn from each other in this time of great change in American medicine. So I really appreciate having spent the time here learning a little bit about UAB, which I've admired for a long time as a great institution. And you have a great leader in Selwyn. You know, he's a Hopkins guy, so I can tell you right now, I will just make a comment. Selwyn, one thing I don't want, Columbia, I just want to save them from claiming me from going to med school there. So I actually went to Yale, and so I know Yale doesn't always like that, but and for me it's a great. So I actually, for me, I don't know. I love the Olympics. This has been for me the great week, just watching these unbelievably talented young people get out there and represent their countries. And so for me, I'm sort of a little tired because I've been staying up every night watching Olympic coverage because it's just. It's just really marvelous. And so you're maybe not getting an Olympic performance today, but I'm going to try my best. So what I thought I'd do today is tell you a little bit about Hopkins. But someone really wanted a topic today, so I've never sort of given this talk before, and normally I'll talk about the great research opportunities in the world today and some of that vision. But today I'm going to talk about integrated healthcare delivery systems. And as someone said, Hopkins is I think, mostly because my predecessors have been a little bit ahead of the curve in building integrated healthcare delivery and finance systems. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And Maryland has a very unique payment system, and I'll tell you a little bit about that and sort of the path we're on and the journey about how you do this, right? And it's funny, listening yesterday, I think we have a lot in common with UAB. You guys are doing some of the same things we're doing, which I think was really great to hear, and hopefully I'll learn a little bit from you. I'm going to talk maybe for about 40, 45 minutes, and then have a little time for questions at the end. So Johns Hopkins, let's a little bit about it. So last year it was 7.7. This year we're an $8 billion enterprise. We have 6 hospitals, 5 of which in the Mid-Atlantic region, 4 ambulatory care centers that are spread around the state, 30 primary care sites. We have the School of Medicine, 41,000 employees, and I'll tell you a little bit about when we think about integrated healthcare delivery, it's really global. So we run hospitals and health systems in 18 countries, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that at the end of the talk. So when you think about Hopkins, and one of the things, I'm now in my 5th year as dean, that has impressed me most about Hopkins is its mission and how deeply the institution believes in the mission, and everything we do has to serve the mission of this institution, which is to improve the health of the community. When Mr. Hopkins gave the gift, the community was Baltimore, but now, as I said, we really think of it as a global community. And we think we do that through research, education, and clinical care. So when we think about things like how many hospitals should be part of our system and where should our geographic footprint be, it's all surrounds how big an enterprise do we need to serve our clinical research mission, educate our students and residents, ensure that we're able to do the volumes of tertiary and quaternary care we need to ensure that our surgeons really have the volumes they need to stay superb. So it really is all about serving mission. And it's one of the great things, I think, that if all academic medicine still thinks in that way, will preserve our I think, really unique place in this country as really the standard of what this country is great, is why it's great, is these academic health centers. So we really believe in the mission. We really believe that we have to focus on improving the health of our community. And it comes to greatness, and it comes to a history of greatness. And you can't think about Hopkins if you don't know Hopkins history. I learned that when I first came. I read all the books, and I watched The Wire a couple times, so I know everything about Hopkins in Baltimore. So it began with Mr. Hopkins, who gave $7 million. He actually gave 2 gifts. He gave a gift to start a university and a gift to begin the hospital. And he said of his gift, he wants this to help those who suffer, both gifts. And that's what he gave money for. He was a bachelor and was the richest man in Maryland. And he gave the money and hired a guy named John Billings to build Hopkins Hospital. At the same time he started a university. The university, it ends up that his gift, you couldn't use the corporates, you can only use the earnings, and it was in B&O Railroad stock, which tanked after he gave it. So there wasn't enough money to start a medical school, so they couldn't start a medical school. And so John Hopkins' best friend was John Garrett, who was the president of B&O Railroad, and he died, and his daughter was Mary Elizabeth Garrett, who's really one of the great philanthropists of our time. And she approached the university, say, my friends and I will give you $100,000 to start a medical school, but it's only if you accept women. And the university said no. Well, they will raise the money anyhow. So 2 or 3 years later, they couldn't raise the money, and they said well, it's better. But now it's $400,000. And Mary Elizabeth said, I'll do that. But women have to be admitted at the same criteria as men. And in addition, they would still trade schools back then. She said they have to go to college and they have to know 3 languages before they can enter. So the first class at Hopkins Medical School, 1893, had 3 women in it. So that today doesn't seem like a big deal, right? Harvard Medical School didn't accept women until 1945, right? So there were only several med schools in the country back then in the 19th century that accepted women, and that was due to Mary Elizabeth Garrett, who's the four founders of Hopkins, the four docs are Welsh, Halstead, Olson, and Kelly, and I'm sure everyone here knows something about all of them. They were two giants. Welsh was the first dean, and Olson was the second dean. And today, that great tradition lies in our two Nobel laureates, Peter Agre and Carol Greider. So it's a great place. It's steeped in tradition and history. It's steeped in being the prototype for the Flexner Report, and very proud of it. And the question is, although you can be very proud of your history, the world's changing a lot. And so what we've been really thinking about, how we preserve what's great about it, really, which is the mission, and still change in terms of American healthcare in the 21st century. And that began in 1994-95. At that point, remember, the health system and university are two separate legal entities from two separate gifts, even though they share the name Johns Hopkins. And at that point, the head of the health system and the dean of the medical school had, this is dean talk, pursuing separate healthcare agendas. So they were not aligned in what they wanted to do. And the boards got together and said, we have to fix this. So they appointed Ed Miller as the first dean CEO and said, Ed, fix this. And what they did is they gave him these goals. The goals were to develop the mission and strategic plan of JHM, to develop implementation plans for the approved strategic plan, to continue to reassess the marketplace and revise the plan and implementation, and consolidate corporate structures, committees, and staff functions. So that's a big undertaking for two huge organizations, and Ed and then Ron Peterson took it on. So the structure looks something like this. So the idea was that the university and the health system would delegate responsibilities from their boards of trustees to a new board called the Board of Johns Hopkins Medicine. That would be responsible for operating and all strategic plan around this integrated healthcare system. And this structure still exists today with the medicine board and executive committee. The president of the university is the head of the executive committee, but the president of the board is a lay chairman, Dave Hodgson from General Atlantic in New York. The office, Johns Hopkins Medicine, will be composed of the president of the health system and the CEO, who is the dean of the School of Medicine, and that was Ed Miller. Now me, and they were responsible both for operations of the School of Medicine and the health system, and to try to integrate them into some shared organizations. So that's what it looked like in '95, and it really is today, except we've grown a lot. And so originally we had Johns Hopkins Hospital, and then we added Bayview Medical Center. We now have a total of 6 hospitals. We, in addition, have several jointly held entities, insurance company called Johns Hopkins Healthcare, a home care group, Ventures, which does a lot of entrepreneurial things, and our international division. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about all of these today. They all roll up to Ron Peterson and I, and to the Board of Medicine. So this was last year's budget, 2015. We were $7.7 billion. This year we're about $8 billion. And one of the interesting things is as a percent of total revenues from 05 to 15, what you can see is really interesting. So the Johns Hopkins hospitals together still are about 43 to 44% of total revenue. One change has occurred is the School of Medicine, which was a third of total revenues in 2005, is only a quarter of revenues now in 2015. And these other entities, which are really the insurance company and the international division, have grown significantly over this time to now be 1/3 of our total revenue. So as I said, one of the things that the boards delegated medicine to do was to think about changes in healthcare and make sure that we strategize and make sure we don't fall behind. And when I came, I said this is my 5th year as dean. When I came there, we came to the realization that healthcare over the next decade would undergo tremendous change. And the stresses on it, I think, are listed here, and they're not new to anyone in this audience. You have functionally decreased research funding from NIH. You had the Affordable Care Act, changing insurance and payment systems. And then you had a real idea that 17 to 18% of GDP can't be going to healthcare moving forward. It certainly can't grow much. And that how you're going to do that, which is downward pressure on payments, increased efficiency, emphasis on preventative measure and population health, and pressure for quality measures and bringing value to the system to decrease readmissions and decrease iatrogenic infections. And I'll tell you a little bit, in Maryland, where we have a totally different payment system that I think, when I told the healthcare leadership yesterday, I think you all were just a little amazed at how we get paid in Maryland, which is very different. It's a total capitated model for our hospitals. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. So what we did was we decided, well, if we're going to undergo these turbulent waters, we better develop a strategic plan to help guide us. So we spent a year doing a strategic plan throughout the organization. It's a big organization to get everyone's buy-in. We thought we had 6 pillars of the plan. We put people first. I'm not going to talk about it, but we really came to the realization that we had built an amazing campus a decade before Ed, and really had built a $1.2 billion new hospital, brand new research facilities, but we really had to focus on people, and that's number one in our strategic plan. Biomedical discovery, patient and family-centered care, education, integration, and performance, really because we are so busy daily to keep this. This is not one of those plans that sits on the shelf. We do all our budgeting only by these 6 priorities. We publish throughout medicine metrics of success every quarter for all these, and at the end of the year present it to all of medicine and to the Board of Trustees. And we're in our 4th year now of it. And today we're going to focus on only one of these pillars, which is integration. So the strategic plan integration has a couple key components of it. One is to integrate the healthcare that we deliver to patients throughout Johns Hopkins Medicine, throughout our 6 hospitals, to ensure that we have the clinical capacity we need to fulfill all our missions, and to think about how you do population health and how you're going to take care of populations rather than the fee-for-service model, which we've all lived through for the past several decades since Medicare came in the 1960s. And we're going to talk about these today. This is a journey. I don't think we've solved almost any of these, but certainly we think we're sort of on the way to at least addressing a lot of these issues in medicine. So a little bit of our footprint. What we've made for our delivery system, we really think we wanted to focus initially on the Mid-Atlantic region. So that's from the Pennsylvania border, parts of Delaware, parts of southern Pennsylvania, through Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Maryland. There's about 8 million people that live in that region, so it's pretty dense. So as I said, we have 5 hospitals here. We have 2 in Washington, D.C., 1 halfway between D.C. and Baltimore. This is Baltimore here. We have our ambulatory sites, which are strategically put so that people throughout the suburbs around these cities can access them. We have a couple affiliated hospitals, in fact 2, again, to sort of think about the geography. These dots move, so this one's actually up here in Annapolis, and we have 1 north of us. We also have, in addition to these affiliated, so these are non-owned sites, we actually have primary care sites throughout the region because we take care of, which I'll tell you about, 350,000 lives in capitated models that we have to deliver healthcare for through some of our insurance products. We have this one off in Florida, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So we think we define our footprint, we think we define the number of beds we need, we think we have the beds sufficient. We're still thinking about where we put our ambulatory sites to ensure that we can take care. We think we'll probably need to influence 2 million lives, either directly through capitated care in our insurance companies or through other mechanisms, ACOs, or other things that we affiliate with, and I'll give you some of the affiliations in a couple minutes. But we really think we have our footprint, we think we know. So, and that's based on these 2 million lives that we approximate we're going to need to fulfill mission to make sure the quaternary stuff is filled at the Hopkins Hospital. So as I said, we have these 6 hospitals: Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Bayview Hospital in Baltimore, All Children's in St. Petersburg, Howard County, which is the 1 halfway between Baltimore and Washington, and 2 in Washington, D.C. So the plan is, how do you have 6 hospitals. For us, it's all about ensuring that the quality of care at each of these hospitals is something that the Board of Trustees will feel that they can be proud of and they can believe is Johns Hopkins Medicine. So how do you do that? 3 of these hospitals, All Children's, Sibley and Suburban, joined us 5 years ago. And so they were new entrants where they were community hospitals, they weren't our physicians there, and how do you make sure that your care that's delivered there is something that we believe is Hopkins quality, and how do you get some efficiency from the system? And that's a journey that we're on, and I'll give you some examples of the approaches we're taking. So I'll begin with the one-off. So Children's Hospital, All Children's in Florida, is a standalone children's hospital, very successful. They We're affiliated with another medical school in Florida, which will remain nameless, but they didn't think that affiliation was going well and wanted to become a Hopkins hospital, so they approached us to take them over. And for us, you know, children's care is something that you need volume for, and we thought both for our clinical research, our clinical care, and our education, we think we needed a larger footprint. And so it really was a win-win for us to do all children's. And they've succeeded beyond expectations. One of the good things is they didn't have our residency there, and so our pediatric department said, what do you think if you had no service requirements, what would you do with the residency program? So we began a residency program there without the residents have to fulfill all those service functions that we've all become so reliant on for our house staff to do. So they set up a new residency program that still takes care of patients, but not with that onerous service requirement that we have. And in our third year of recruiting that, it's done very, very well. We put our medical students down there, so educationally they became part of us. They really wanted to do research, and we've joined. They have now a Hopkins IRB. They are building a large research building there. And we put a lot of our physicians, it was not a hard sell for some people who lived in Baltimore for a long time, said, do you want to move to Florida? So actually the head of pediatric surgery, the head of pediatric neurosurgery, and the head of the residency program were full professors at Hopkins that moved down. So it's really Hopkins, and for us it's so Hopkins that this year we branded it. So for us to become Johns Hopkins All Children meant that they're succeeding at all parts of the mission, which they're doing. We just rebranded them this year. So they're being very, very successful. They have great programs, great outcomes, and along with our Children's Center in Baltimore are working together on a whole bunch of protocols. So it's been a real success story for us, and really feels, I mean, to go there feels like Hopkins. So then we have our Bayview Medical Campus, which joined Hopkins. It was the old city hospital. In 1984, the city gave it to us for $1. It now, if it was a standalone medical center, it would be the 40th ranked medical school in the country in terms of NIH funding. It's a cool campus. It's 3 miles from our main campus. It has 2 NIH institutes on it, both the National Institute of Aging and the National Institute of Drug Abuse, all physically not in Bethesda, but are sitting in our Bayview campus. So 2 of the NIH institutes are there. What we've tried to do is rationalize care between the 2 academic medical centers in Baltimore. So some programs are totally at this campus. All our lung programs, pulmonary, lung cancer, we just put our radiation therapy out there for lung cancer. Rheumatology's out there, allergies out there, all our hip replacements, because we do them cheaper out there. It's a little bit lower cost out there. So we have a whole bunch of us out there, and it really feels like just a Hopkins campus. And it's really, as I said, been very successful, really in the tripartite mission, has both shared residency programs and its own residency programs, and serves a community in the eastern part of Baltimore, but in addition, increasingly has tertiary care that we rationalize between the 2 campuses. Sibley Memorial Hospital. So again, we had 2 Washington hospitals join us 5 years ago. That was part of a plan to get out of Baltimore and really become a major presence in Washington, D.C., because that's where the growth is, in the Mid-Atlantic region, not in the Baltimore area. So Sibley was the hospital in Washington, D.C. They came in as a wholly owned subsidiary of the health system. Part of that was to build a new hospital for them that's going to open next month. And for us strategically, Washington, D.C. did not have a major cancer center. And we thought that that's something that we could provide to the people in the district and the suburbs, which is a cancer center. So we built a cancer center on the campus, including the proton beam facility for all of Hopkins Medicine. It's going to be located there, and we partnered with Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. to build this. So our proton beam facility with 3 gantries is going to be at this, what was a community hospital. Imagine community hospital now has the proton beam for all of Hopkins Medicine. In addition, we're putting our oncologists, our radiologists, our pathologists down there to build a cancer center for the District of Columbia. Suburban Hospital is just, again, about 5 miles away in Bethesda, Maryland. Again, it was a very successful hospital. It's across the street from the NIH. And because of that location, it had several joint programs with the NIH in things like cardiothoracic surgery and neurosurgery. So that's great for us because it already had great research there, great ties to the NIH, And again, we're building a new, part of the deal was we built a new hospital there. It is a really community hospital for Bethesda. And between our two Washington, D.C. hospitals, we rationalize care. Most of the cancer at Sibley. Cardiac care is at Suburban. Neurosurgery, neurology, neurosciences are at Suburban. Orthopedics go between, and Sibley has all of the deliveries. And so we're trying to rationalize care between these two and get some efficiencies between them. Howard County is a small community hospital in the fifth richest county in the country, in Howard County, which is halfway between Washington and Baltimore. They really are the only hospital in the county. This must seem common to you guys. I'm sure some of your hospitals feel like that too. They're really good, and now 50% of the staff at this hospital is Hopkins faculty, and we've done that over 15 years of generally just when there are needs there, filling it in. I guess we'll sort of the same strategy that you're all doing in some of your hospitals and been very successful. And then Johns Hopkins Hospital. So Johns Hopkins Hospital is 1,000 beds. It's the #1 hospital in the country. U.S. News Report might say 3 or 4 or 2, but it is the #1 hospital in the United States. And it is, I'm there, it is a really great hospital. I'll just tell you one of the things, so when we think, so we do a lot of, like you guys do, a lot of tertiary and quaternary care, a lot of really sophisticated things. And the question is, how can we really bring added value above that to people? And really, our focus has been ensuring quality and safety and trying to lead the country and thinking about how you make a hospital safe. And one of the things we're doing, I'll just give you one, we'll talk a little bit more, is really transparency of outcomes. We think that's really important. So we put all of our safety measures, be that CLABSI or be that hand hygiene, all of our safety measures that we measure ourselves on a website that anyone can go to at any time. And that sort of puts a lot of pressure on ourselves to perform, right? Because we're out there for our patients and the public, and anytime they can see our scores on our internal measurements of our quality and safety measures. And we think we're going to increasingly do that. We think that really is important for us because it really drives our people to ensure that, as you are, we're very competitive folks, and we don't want to not excel at anything. So it's been something that's driving our quality and safety measures. So how do you integrate these 6 hospitals? I'm going to give you some examples. I'm sure you all, it sounded like what we talked about yesterday, you all are doing some of the same things. And for us, #1 thing was one electronic medical record in all of the hospitals. So we did Epic implementation. You guys have Cerner. For us, it's a huge investment, right? So for us, for all our hospitals, it's $1 billion 10-year ownership of Epic. If you look 10 years, our Epic spend is $1 billion. So it's a huge expenditure. And the question is how you leverage it and how you get a return on it and how you make sure that it's really helping patients. And it does some easy stuff like MyChart they've built in, but we're really focused in on, as we move in Maryland to population health, how you leverage Epic to ensure that you can do that. And it's something that we're spending a large amount of resources on. The other simple thing that I'll tell you that we did that all might be interested in is, I said all our hospitals are Epic, well, not except for our children's hospital in Florida, which is on Cerner, which had invested all this money on Cerner 5 years ago, and we didn't feel like. But believe it or not, we got Cerner and Epic to communicate. So our Cerner in Florida talks to our Epic in Baltimore. All right? Is that and we just said to them, they said, you're telling us the kids in Florida and the kids in Baltimore can't talk? I mean, it's ridiculous. And so Judy Faulkner did it, and so Epic and Cerner, our Epic and Cerner talk to each other. So if you all have some of these issues, you just got to say, look, this is the right thing to do for patients. And I got to tell you, Epic and Cerner, there'll be interoperability within 5 years because of the pressure on them. And they can do it. If they tell you they can't do it, you tell them they can do it. It's not a technical thing. It is a political issue, right? So the other thing we did is, so how do you get docs in community hospitals to think about the same type of care that you're going to give at Hopkins Hospital? And so we had a lot of fits and starts here that didn't work, to be quite honest. And so we came up with a couple models I'm going to describe that are working, and we think they're scalable, but one of them is clinical communities. So what we came around with is that physicians in community hospitals are generally provide excellent care, and it's often different, and every community hospital will be different, and Hopkins Hospital will be different. And I'm not going to say better or worse, they're just different. And the question is, can you get best practices between all these hospitals and also become efficient between all the hospitals? So we say it's the best way to do is physicians together. So what we did is we did these clinical communities around issues. And we say we get all the docs, and actually we get other delivery, like nurses are in the room, and we even have some patients on these clinical communities. We put them all in a room, and we say, what are the big problems you guys can work together? So I'll give you an example. So we did the clinical community for blood transfusions, led by our anesthesiologists and some surgeons, said, how can we decrease the number of blood transfusions? People in medicine were in it. And so we said, what are the best practices? You know, when are we going to transfuse? When are we not going to transfuse? And how many units are we going to transfuse? We did that and said, you know, you don't have to always give 2 units. Often 1 unit will suffice for your goal. We've done that. We've saved 10%. We've decreased blood transfusions among our hospitals by 10%. And we've saved $2 million in transfusion costs just by the docs getting together and set up protocols for when you transfuse and how much you transfuse. We did the similar thing in colorectal surgery. So colorectal surgery, this is just so we have these 5 adult hospitals here. We say, okay, we do colorectal surgery. That's a big deal, right? And there's a lot of morbidity around it. And when you put it on its feet, they all did it a little differently. All fine, but just a little differently. So pre-surgery diet, from nothing to eat at midnight before to nothing to eat or drink 2 hours before. And we got all the surgeons in the room and said, we want one way to do it across the system. Epic helps because now we can put whatever it is on Epic and it drives the protocols. And we did it for colorectal surgery, and they're seeing great outcomes after it. So, but it is getting everyone in the room and just saying, this is important for the patients. How are we going to do it similarly? Can we get some efficiency, some cost savings out of it? And can we improve our outcomes? And we're finding that getting the people in the room, it's a lot of work, but it really does work. And we do it through a shared governance. And so what we have is, through all of Johns Hopkins Medicine, we have the patient and safety quality community. So this is one governing board that governs quality and safety in every hospital through our Armstrong Institute. Armstrong Institute was founded by the board chair, Mike Armstrong. Peter Pronovost runs it. It's a research institute that's one of the things about Hopkins is our research guides our clinical care, that all of our clinical care needs to be based in evidence, and that's through research. So the Armstrong Institute is one of the leaders in the country in research in quality and safety measures. Peter Pronovost did the checklist for CLABSI in the ICU, right? That was his. And so we do that again and again. We're getting these people together. And what we do is they have to come in front of us quarterly. So we have a quality group for inpatient hospitals, for pediatrics. We do home care, our international division. One of the tougher things we have community hospitals are the ambulatory practices, right? Because it's harder to measure. But we have people in charge of the ambulatory practices and ambulatory surgery centers. They all come together quarterly. All the presidents of the hospitals and our board chairs sit in a room together, and they throw up their HCAPs and they throw up their quality measures, and it's that red, yellow, green, and if it's not green, we ask why it's not green and how you're going to get it to be green. And so there's accountability at the president of the hospital level to all the board. So remember, every hospital still has its own board because they by rule, by joint commission, you have to have that. And they get in front of all these chairs and they have to tell us why they're not performing quality and safety. And if you look at our quality and safety scores since we set up the structure, they're skyrocketing. We're hitting on all wheels in this. And it's really accountability. And it's really been very successful. And we're also doing it in supply chain. So my CFO made me do this, so I'm sure you like this. So we have across our hospitals, we have a $1.6 billion spend in supplies and services. And so for us, that is a place we need to get some costs out. So, we saved so far $33 million. Buying the same HP printer, that saved $1 million. So using the same printer in all our hospitals, you can save $1 million. I mean, that's low-hanging fruit, right? So just trying to get best practices to do that across this large system. And now we're partnering with some other systems in some new types of strategies to do this. We also do the other strategy we're using to integrate our interdisciplinary service lines. We had a great discussion about it yesterday, and this is a journey to do these. And I'd like to say there's only one way to do a service line, and what I've learned now, because I've done these at Iowa, is there isn't one way. Everyone has to be a little different. But basically, what I ask the folks to do is center around what's best for the patient. Start with the patient. what does the patient need in terms of their care? And then let's figure out all those built up administrative structures and silos that we've all built up over the decades and get rid of them and put what's best for the patient. And so we're right now pretty far along in our Musculoskeletal Institute, and obviously there are a lot of departments that play roles here. But, you know, and there's turf battles, and let's just face it, there is at any center. And I said, I don't want to hear that. What does the patient need to get better? And then we'll figure the rest out. And being integrated, as you all are too, helps move the money around to do it right. And so this is a journey, but we're pretty far along with this service line. We're pretty excited about it. The other thing that we've thought about is to make people Hopkins hospitals, they need research and education. We're farther along in research, and so what we did was we set up a separate research arm just for the community hospitals in the capital region, Sibley, Suburban, and Howard County. We put money to just making sure they're all doing research. We put together an IRB for them, that's a Hopkins IRB. We now have 100 researchers in these different hospitals doing research, both initiated at the hospitals and also Hopkins Hospital research coming down to the capital region. The other thing we did that we really, I think has been very successful is centralized credentialing. So we have 3,000 faculty at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, and we have another 3,000 physicians that are credentialed at our community division. So that's 6,000 physicians that we have to credential. And each hospital has its own way, and obviously some things you have to do because there are Joint Commission rules. But being said, can we get some efficiency out of credentialing across all the hospitals? And we've been able to do it. So we credential people by one process through all the different hospitals. So that's the good news, but you know, integration of hospitals it's been a slog. I mean, you know, there is still resistance to change. My board worries about diluting the brand all the time. That's what I hear. Are we diluting the brand? Are these really Hopkins quality places? As I said, medical staff privileges, we just got over. Getting training programs in all these hospitals is hard because these community hospitals don't have the same revenue stream that an academic hospital does, and it's a cost to them, and we're trying to convince them of where they have upside on it. One of the big things are department chairs. You know, a lot of these chairs were hired to run a department at Hopkins, and now we're asking our department chairs to run a system, right? So for us, since quality and safety number one, my head of surgery is not only responsible for quality at Johns Hopkins Hospital, they're responsible for quality in all 6 hospitals. And that's and how you do that, and that, you know, a lot of them have been around a while, that's an added responsibility. So getting them the infrastructure they need and support they need to really think of themselves as system leaders and not just the head of a department at Johns Hopkins Hospital has been something that has taken us a while to do. And same thing for our faculty. And you know, we are still learning on Epic on how to get a return on investment on it. And you know, we are not there yet, but we have to. It's, I think, important for our patients. So I got 10 minutes I'm going to tell. So part of the drive here and the reason that we're a little different from other hospitals is the Maryland payment system. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. So it was in the 1970s it began. And it was given a waiver by Medicare and Medicaid by CMS, and it's a pretty unique system. So it's what's called an all-payer system. And so what that meant was every payer pays Johns Hopkins Hospital the same for the cholecystectomy. Medicaid, Medicare, commercial will pay Johns Hopkins Hospital the same amount of money for the cholecystectomy. That doesn't mean that they pay Johns Hopkins Hospital the same thing as a community hospital, Suburban, because they have less costs. So in the cost for Johns Hopkins Hospital, all GME costs are in it, indigent care is in it, and some of the other unique services. So we built that in our cost structure, and the state commission, the Health Service Review Commission, takes that own account and it gives a rate and regulates the rate. So think about it, you're all a provider. There's a lot of good things about that. I spent 20 years at Columbia, and you know, at Columbia, a Medicaid patient is not equal to a commercial payment, and I bet you that's true at most hospitals in the country. Because of this idea that we're cross-subsidizing the government payers, Medicaid pays, what do they pay you, 30 cents on the dollar for a hospital, something like that? So you have to cross-subsidize with commercial payers, right? Here, you don't have to do that because everyone's paying the same. So the government is actually paying the true cost of care for government-insured patients. Right, so that's really great. So, and that's really helped the state's economy because their insurance rates are lower because the commercial insurance is not cross-subsidizing the government payers. So in some ways, it's been a great system like that. It has regulated the amount of money any hospital makes because they know the revenues of every hospital, they know the bottom line of every hospital. So you don't see any hospitals in the state, or haven't seen hospitals, with double-digit margins. If you had a double-digit margin, your rates would not be the same rates next year, right? The other thing that is different is physicians are not in it. And so physicians' rates are still negotiated with the insurance companies. So it's been a pretty unique system. And I said yesterday, about 3 years ago, the state was worried that the waiver test would not be successful for some other reasons that I won't go into. So they renegotiated the rate into the new model, which began in 2014. So this model is a little different. It's still state regulated, but now you have a global cap on revenues to a hospital. And year to year, that would go up 3.58% plus statewide population growth. So right, the state population doubled, you take that into account. And all the hospitals in the state agreed to that. So what that means, so Johns Hopkins Hospital, let's say their revenue for a year is $2 billion. Next year, they would get $2.07 billion in revenue. They still bill fee for service, but their capacity to get that money is capped. So let's say your volume is lower the first 6 months, your hospital rates go up the next 6 months to make up for the fact that your revenue for the first 6 months might be below expectations because your volumes went down. So the idea behind this is you're not driven by volume. In fact, volume is not a good thing for the bottom line. Decreasing your volume is a good thing for the bottom line. So the idea is you get rid of some of these readmissions that don't have to go, or some admissions that could be dealt with as an outpatient. You are incentivized to build things in your community that take care of patients out of the hospital setting in cheaper settings. And the idea was to save $330 million over the 5 years of this. So we're now in our third year. We have saved over half of all the saving in the first 2 years. We've saved that $330 million we promised Medicare we'd save them. We saved them half in just 2 years. We see volumes go down in hospitals. We're seeing readmission rates go down across the state. So a lot of the things they want to have occurred, but we're still trying to figure out how you pay for market shifts. But it is incentivizing us to start to think beyond the walls of the hospital to how you take care of people in the local community, because if they're healthier, you're going to get less admissions. And so you're starting to think about population health in your communities. And that's a long road, because none of us have really focused on population health almost anywhere. And even a Kaiser who's done it has done it for their patients, but not for communities. And so how do you do that for communities? So we began this journey now 4 years ago when I first came. We got a large grant from the CMMI, from CMS, $21 million grant to try to think about how you take care of people in your community. And we focused on post-discharge, and then the people who are potentially high expenditures. Those are really people with, the dual eligibles, Medicaid, Medicaid eligibles, and people with the right? So there are 4 forms of addiction in impoverished communities in this country. So the addictions are to tobacco, food, alcohol, and drugs. Those 4 addictions account for a lot of the healthcare expenditures in this country, and if we can fix those 4 addictions, so a lot of the expenditures on behavioral health and behavioral modification that we're trying to do in our local communities. I'll give you an example of how it works. So, what we did is, and we, like you, probably have both post-discharge care, and so you have a local person that came in with a mild stroke. We went home, our nurses from our neuroscience service try to call, how you doing? I don't know what drugs I'm taking. Can we come visit you? No, I don't want anyone here. And then that person is out there in the community getting sick and then comes back in for readmission. What we did here is try to overcome that. And what we did is we went to the local churches in our communities and said, can you help us? And what they did is they identified community workers, community members who wanted to help. And we trained them as community healthcare workers through the churches. And then we partnered with them to outreach to the local people after discharge. And you know what? That person would open their door to their neighbor who we've trained, who comes into the home after discharge and say, can I help you? And they said, yeah, because they knew the person or they would sit in the same church as the person. And so we're seeing real impact using our trained community healthcare workers in our local community for post-discharge care of a lot of the patients that we see around our 7 zip codes. We also started an ACO called JMAP that has 36,000 Medicare patients. One of the nice things about here is, you know, I said we need to influence about 2 million people. We partner with 2 huge group practices in the area. We don't own them, but we're sharing best practices in this ACO, and it's a way that we don't have to own everyone. As long as we can influence care, we can align missions, that's probably what we want to occur. Am I doing my time? Okay. I'm going to just have a couple more things to talk about and then answer questions. One of the other things, I know you all do this too here, is an insurance company. So we've had over 20 years of having insurance companies. That's a Priority Partners, which is a Medicaid MCO, which takes care of 250,000 Medicaid, the largest Medicaid MCO in the state. We have a private, we do a TPA for both the university and health system. That's 41,000 people in that. We have a Department of Defense health plan called USFHP, which is a TRICARE type product, which had 60,000 people in that. And we have a Medicare Advantage product too. So through this, again, we're influencing lives, trying to deal with the populations that our hospitals are now responsible for because there's this new payment system. And it's really getting to a state where you're really going to have almost most of the population under some form of capitated care moving forward. And to that, the nice thing is our insurance companies are aligned with us now because they're investing in healthcare case managers to manage these people, because it's so important for our hospital system to make sure that these people are taken care for at home. A lot of case managers taking care of these folks and trying to keep them well. Now, I said that we really have a mid-Atlantic region strategy, but in fact, we do a little bit more than that. So pictured here is, I showed you our hospital affiliates. We also run for several large companies like Pepsi and Frito-Lay and some other large corporations. We do their employer health in their factories and warehouses around the country. We have a hospital at home service, which you can see in blue, which is around the country too. And we run Armstrong Institute. Now, we partner people who want to work with the Armstrong Institute. They can do that for their own quality and safety measures. And we have several health systems across the country who want to do that. And you can see we draw patients. So at any one time at Hopkins Hospital, 20 to 25% of the patients are from out of state or international patients. And so here you can see sort of the regions that they come from. So for us, we do have a national, but not like some other places are doing in terms of owning hospitals around the country. That's not what we're going to do. We do have some partnerships, though, that we're finding really helpful. One is Kaiser. So Kaiser has been able to, as I said, for us, we have to leverage Epic. Kaiser's had Epic for a long time, knows how to leverage it to take care of populations, and they also have a presence in the Mid-Atlantic region. We've had a great partnership with them, taking care of folks in the Washington, D.C. area, in addition, trying to work together on some research projects. Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield and Allegheny Healthcare in Western Pennsylvania. We're partnering with them. We provide all that cancer care for them in the Pittsburgh area. And so these regional partnerships are really ways that we're learning how different systems take care of populations. And we also have a global presence. So we take care of, we do research in 108 countries. We run hospitals, health systems in 18 countries, and we have outreach throughout the world, intake throughout the world. So the green dots are the research things, and the yellow dots are some of those. And I'll just tell you a little bit about some of them. So we have, our largest international is in Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Aramco is an oil company that you've heard about that is worth, I don't know how many trillions of dollars. So they have 350,000 employees and dependents in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They carved out the healthcare for all those into a joint venture with us. So we're in Saudi Arabia taking care of 350,000 people throughout the kingdom with Saudi Aramco, that we run that system for them. In addition to an eye hospital in Riyadh, we run hospitals in Chile, Peru, Brazil. We have a joint venture for a cancer center in Singapore. We're doing some stuff in China. So really around the world that we run hospital health systems. It helps us get patients to Hopkins, and we also get a revenue stream to support mission back in Baltimore. So I think I wanted to end. So I have about 10 minutes for questions, so I'd love to hear questions or hear comments from the audience. So thank you.
Ed, sorry, Paul, one of the things that you mentioned early on is commitment to mission. And obviously you've got a large dynamic program, particularly facing the changes in healthcare. How do you protect both the core science and research? And what do you think the impact of all these changes on the science, which has made Hopkins so well known?
So the way we like to say it is our research informs our clinical care. And if you have that mindset that research is so core to how you're going to deliver care, then it's not two missions, it's one mission, right? It is a mission to improve the health of the community because you're going to push the boundaries of science and give them better clinical care. So we don't think of it as two. That's like this tripartite mission. I don't believe in the tripartite. There's one mission, improve the health of your community. We can do that by different mechanisms, but it's a shared mission. And so when we think about it, that's mission. So we're doing precision medicine centers of excellence we talked about yesterday. So that is how you push the boundaries of science to take care of our patients better. And it's science and research together. We don't distinguish them. That being said, our clinicians are, they have to get grants. Like we're on soft money, like most people are, and they're working really hard. We do a lot of internal funding, like you all do. We try to get the resources to do it. Our, clinical entities are being, as I said before, all of us are getting real pressures on margins, and so finding the money to support mission is really for what keeps me up at night. Probably keeps everyone up here at night too. As you know, we've talked about, we raised last year $391 million in philanthropy. That is only part of the picture to help support that mission. We really believe philanthropy is an important part of it. But for us, mission is so core. It is the mission to improve the health community. And research is so central to us that we don't ever think of that as two separate missions. So.
Questions for Paul?
Thank you for a very impressive and informative presentation. I think you very eloquently explained the successful structural systems, financial and clinical care integration across the Hopkins system. One of the keys to success is cultural integration. And it's often an under-measured metric to kind of inform how successful you are in terms of integration. So how do you ensure that the Hopkins experience for providers, for patients, is the same across your national and global footprint? Yeah,
that's the line is that culture eats strategies lunch every day of the week, something like that. So if you ask me, is there one uniform way to do it? No. I think for us, we think of each hospital separately because each one, there are really 4 community hospitals, and each one is different, has its own culture that developed over decades. And so obviously, like Old Children's had a great culture. So for us, that was really easy. Their culture was really shared. Their board believed in our same culture. So that one, we were able, within 5 years, for me, I think the culture is indistinguishable. Bayview, that was easy. Some of the other community hospitals, Howard County, we've had for 20 years, and it's not there yet. So you drive, you want to drive, people want to be excellent. People want to take care of patients. So that sort of shared culture that you can do. I think, as I told the group yesterday, I think getting education in all these, from my experience when I talked to folks at Pittsburgh, they were not able to culturally get the community hospitals on to board until they taught in all of them at some level, either resident or student teaching. So we're really pushing getting education in all the community hospitals as a next step to culturally acclimate them to what Hopkins is. But it is not low-hanging fruit.
Paul, one of the things that is similar between Birmingham and Baltimore, it's a town really led, rather than dominated, but led by often churches and hospitals. And that's Baltimore. There are urban communities built around blue-collar industry, steel mostly, and shipbuilding in Baltimore. And their academic medical centers have really been the service engine as well as the economic engine for the cities. But I know historically, Hopkins has not been fully integrated to being about Baltimore, that is at every core. What are the things that you've seen or done in Hopkins medicine, and Ron Daniels, the president, to really be a presence and lead changer in a city that's struggling with all of the strife, the Freddie Gray, Black Lives Matter, all the things that you have to live because your town is nearly 60% African American?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, we have historically, anyone read the Henry Ladder Lacks book? Right, and believe it or not, people they're still in the community. They tell their kids don't walk by Hopkins Hospital at night because they're going to steal you and do research on it. I mean, that is still urban legend in our community. So
when I was a resident,
yeah,
you wanted to go any place but Hopkins for care because you're going to get experimented on.
Yeah, so there is a historic, as Selwyn knows, one of the great things, you have a visionary leader, the president of Hopkins Hospital is Ron Daniels, who really, since he came there, he's been there now 6 years, has really thought about, if Baltimore doesn't succeed, Hopkins will succeed. We're not moving, like you are, you're not moving out of Birmingham, right? So you got to make this city successful, and we've done a lot of things to outreach. Things like so we went out after the unrest in last April, we went out to the community and asked the community what they want. And you know what they want? They want jobs. Right? That's what they want. They said, if you give us jobs, a lot of this, because there's real helplessness in those communities. And so we've been working on jobs. And so we've been working on even low paying jobs. So we're actually, Hopkins Hospital is the largest employer of ex-offenders in the state of Maryland. We hire 100 people per year who are ex-offenders. And we put, we put a lot of resources around them to make sure they're successful. And, a lot of them, they're not violent ex-offenders, right? They're mostly, young kids who did something stupid, usually drug-related. And so we get them in, so we hire them. We've got the state, all the hospitals are hiring 1,000 new people with low-paying wages. The problem we have with the same as you is, 3 decades ago, we were big steel manufacturing like you all, and those jobs for people with lower education, that job is gone, from our communities. And so the question is, you gotta get these people working again because they have this helplessness. So a lot in the school systems, we're gonna do this P-Tech thing that IBM started in New York City. We're doing it in Baltimore, where IBM's it took a high school, Hopkins Hospital, we took a high school, and we're gonna train up people in that hospital for jobs within Hopkins medicine. So, that's low, high school educated type jobs, and we have them, and we're just gonna hire people. So our major emphasis is on revitalization of the local community. So we have a great partnership to rebuild the 90 acres near us, and jobs, they want jobs. And so we're focused on just getting them jobs.
Questions for Paul? Paul, we enjoyed the talk. It was right on point. You've done a phenomenal job. We're excited about your visit, and thank you for coming to Bayview.
Thank you for having me. I will have to say before I leave, you got a great dean here in Selwyn Perkins.
Yes. In recognition of your visit, this is a plaque that annualizes our leadership lecture, so thank you again.
Oh, thank you, Selwyn. It's really nice. Appreciate it.
Outstanding. We'll mail that to you.
Yeah.
We got to sign it.
Yeah.